Hey guys, this is Loman02. I'm currently doing a recording of White Weenie, which Golden Lynn's playing, versus a red-green, what I call Rampy Moon deck. It's actually a very simple deck. It does have some money cards in it, but it's generally speaking a relatively inexpensive deck to build and play, and it's actually fairly linear in how it plays. The reason I designed this deck, and I'll open up the deck after we go through the matches and kind of why I built it and kind of showing the proof of the pudding first, I suppose, is because I think red-green mid-range to mid-range ramp actually has very good matchups against an aggressive meta and a lot of metas that aren't playing blue in them. So the deck itself is really sideboard tech to beat blue or to try to beat blue because typically speaking it shouldn't beat like blue-black dot removal deck or counterspell dot removal deck. So it's designed to beat aggro and also the greedy decks because it runs a main deck, Magus the Moon, sideboard Blood Moon, and tends to be pretty good against aggro. So going in this hand is pretty good. I assume I'm playing against White Weenie. It's kind of what I expected out of him. So I lead with Dried Arbor because I assume his removal is pretty limited. He has some of the best removal, but just not a ton of it. So I play it out here, hoping that it doesn't get killed. So I can play the Wall of Roots I drew on turn 1 and hopefully get into natural order. We see Smuggler's Copter, which is a strong start from our opponent. And then lead off with our Wall of Roots, just kind of continuing to ramp up, but not really apply any pressure to our opponent yet. He goes ahead and attacks, and I believe discards a Spirit of the Labyrinth. We play on our next forest. Go ahead and get rid of the Dryad Arbor. I consider very briefly getting Tarka, but I get Primeval Titan because I figure if this in some way, shape, or form gets removed, or if it gets O-ringed or anything like that, then I've already gotten some value off of it, and I've replaced the card I've expended on natural order. We see Palace Jailer, which is a very strong one. So our opponent's White Weenie draw has been very strong here and had good answers to most of what we've been doing, plus some good flyers here. Now, when I see him tap the Bygone Bishop, I think he's correctly seen through my ploy, which is that I really want to steal the emblem for a turn. I play the Dryad, the Bloodbraid Elfhound, which I assume is going to get blocked by the Palace Jailer here. Yavimaya Dryad for an additional land, I believe just Stomping Ground, because it's coming into play tapped either way. And then play out the Fierce Empath, I believe looking for Inferno Titan at this point, because I think that's the best way to beat White Weenie. I think Inferno Titan is just one of the better finishers in red for Big Red. The Titans in general are just great finishers in their colors. The Blue Titan is a little more speculative. The White Titan is more combo-y, but it's good in a lot of different combo style decks. So we're getting attacked by Team Flyer here, but what you'll see next turn is, well, one, we're able to cast, I believe, 12 mana worth of spells, or maybe 14 mana worth of spells here, because how the deck's set up. But we essentially blow apart his entire team, kind of the way the deck was designed to beat this style of deck. And then gain some arbitrary life here just to ensure that, whatever he has on 4 cards is not going to kill us. And I think he's actually just dead here, too. Yes, he is, because we end up finding 2 mountains, which, because they simultaneously enter, albeit being the 5th and 6th lands, they're treated both as the 6th land because they enter simultaneously upon checking for Valakut, which does 6 additional damage and allows us to kill this turn. So we end up boarding the deck. I believe take out the Magus of the Moon and take out like one of the swords that's in the deck, and some other nonsense card that we didn't think we'd need in this. That was more of a lock piece for the Moon portion of the deck. And go ahead and believe play Sudden Demise, Disorder, and Anarchy. So the deck is very honed, very focused on beating White Weenie, Red Deck Wins, and 4-color Blood, which I think are kind of the metagame. That's where the 100-card metagame is kind of stagnated right now. And it's one of the recommendations I made to fellow player Sung when she played in this last Saturday's event, is that she go with like a red-green, Stampy or, Rampy, whatever you want to call it, style decks. I thought it was very well set up to be predatory towards a lot of the decks that have seen a lot of play recently in the meta. Without blue, you're pretty good to go on this style of deck. It's a pretty solid either mid-range or long game strategy with just big dumb creatures. We get Garruk online here. End up playing out the Abrade because I think Thalia is just going to be worse for me. Plus, if my Garruk gets to live, it'd be nice to be able to ultimate him with an Obstinate Baloth and 2 other creatures in play and just kill my opponent. Opponent has Council's Judgment, which is strong, but we have Thragtusk here. Of note, I didn't really care for the Mother of Runes attack that happened earlier on. I think my opponent... a general rule of thumb is don't attack with Mother of Runes, unless it's going to win you the game and there's nothing they can do. But this early in the game, just to get 3 incremental damage in is just kind of bad to me because, this game would have played out a lot differently if I had to wait for Incinerate and Abrade and then just lost one of those cards to deal with the Mother. I also don't like this block. So one of the cool things about White Weenie decks is that First Strikers and Flyers, much like Thalia plus Sigiled Paladin, can often do some pretty cool team blocks. Banding may not be a thing that's printed on Magic cards anymore, but they work very well together to stymie much larger creatures. So I liked keeping taking the 5-hit down to 8 and keeping the Exalted little Sigiled Paladin in play. We do get our 5-hit in this turn with the Thragtusk. We see an Ajani Color of Pride, made more expensive due to Thalia's effect. Draw more land, and then just Alpha Strike. Well, I guess not Alpha Strike. Strike with everything but the Deathrite Shaman here because it's all we need to do to kill our opponent. That's how the game played out. Not the most interesting of games, but I kind of wanted to showcase what the deck is designed to do. We didn't even have particular hate cards there. The deck just does that. It's the deck right here. The one Zung played was a little more aggressive to mid-range. This deck is much more, is more so on the sliding scale towards just a ramp deck. So we have big end targets like Dragonlord Atarka, which I don't tend to think 4-color Blood can generally beat. I don't think White Weenie can beat this card almost ever if it's if you're not already just dead. Inferno Titan, same thing. The card just destroys White Weenie. And then we have all the good life gainers like Thragtusk, Obstinate Baloth, Kitchen Finks should be in this, but for some reason it's not. I'll have to fix that. Courser of Crewfix is in here. And then sideboard, a couple other options. Actually, not for that, but so we have a few good ones. Kitchen Finks, like I said, should be in here, though. That's a miss on my part, and maybe the Den Protector comes out for because Den Protector is just kind of slow. But that should be in here. And we could also cut possibly Sword of Feast and Famine. I do like the swords in this style of deck, though, because you're going to have so much mana that having an additional 5-drop or something that requires a lot of mana to use is not going to be a big deal. But the deck is much more value-based than the more aggressive versions still used. As you can tell, I have cards like Firebolt, which I think is great in this style of deck. You're always going to have extra mana laying around, and just being capable of exchanging one card for 2 is great. Forked Bolt maybe doesn't have to be main, but I'm running it main because I just expect my meta to be very aggressive. I expect to see Jackal Pups, turn 1 Kithians, etc. Grim Lavamancer, same idea. We expect that we'll be trading off resources through the combat step and through just cards like Secure Tribe Elder, Nature's Lore, Incinerates, Abrades, you name it. We'll be utilizing our cards to cashing them in through combat just to essentially beat through our opponent. What the deck ideally is designed to do, though, is use all these low-end ramp cards, ramp creatures, to really get into big payoff cards, like Primeval Titan. Woodland Bellower is essentially an extra copy of either Primeval Titan, Inferno Titan, or Dragonlord Atarka because it combos very well with this little 3-drop right here, Fierce Empath, which essentially puts 7 power on the board, 6 toughness, and gets you one of these cards that you may need. And generally speaking, one of any of them is pretty good, and they can all win the game relatively fast. Inferno Titan probably the fastest to win the game. Dragonlord Atarka is probably Dragonlord Atarka and Inferno Titan are the 2 best cards to get when you're coming back from behind. Dragonlord Atarka is a little better at coming back from behind, but does not kill as fast as Inferno Titan. And Primeval Titan is kind of just the go-to for Natural Order. If you're already ahead, it'll ensure you stay ahead. It'll thin your deck, and it gives you a Valakut kill, which is pretty quick. I would say probably about on the speed level of Dragonlord Atarka, possibly slower. Really only second to Inferno Titan as far as how fast can kill. You look at our 5s. Our 5s are also quite powerful, but they also have an eye for value. So I'm playing Conclave Naturalist in this deck because I want to have a lot of flexible answers to cards, and I really like to have my cards come into play, have an effect, trade, for a resource, and then leave one behind that's valid. And a 4/4 is a fine card. And then I also use a lot of Planeswalkers in this deck because I think they're going to tend to outvalue White Weenie, and a lot of them act as creatures. Nissa is essentially a creature. Sarkhan is essentially a creature, except he cannot block, but he's also a removal spell, which is nice in a deck that wants to make sure its removal spells can dual hat. Garruk is just a way of getting after cards. He's just a built-in card engine, and tends to work pretty good at doing that. Acidic Slime, this card is a bomb. I think if it was printed nowadays, it'd probably only cost 4 mana. It's a little expensive, but, a 2/2 that trades very easily with many things that don't have first strike and also just comes into play and hits, most of the tougher permanent types to hit, is pretty second to none. You don't see it a lot, though, anymore. The Right Dusk, just a great life gainer, leaves a threat behind when it blocks and trades. And then Stormbreath Dragon, because I expect white to be heavier in the meta. This is my dragon of choice in this. Well, my second dragon of choice, of course. Miss Lady Atarka herself is my big dragon. But Stormbreath Dragon is just a great card against decks that are relying on white to remove creatures. And 4/4 means it's generally going to be out of range of most red deck wins kill spells. And if it ever gets to, monstrous, which is a lot of mana, it may or may not be relevant at that point in the game, then it's going to be out of range of most things that are not black-based removal. So, going into the fours, again, you can see we have Sarkhan Vol, which is actually good against 4-color blood because it allows you to steal their most relevant threat and hit them with it and allow you to race. And or you can just give whatever monstrous creature you play, haste. And I've done this with this deck before. Obviously not in the match I just showed with Inferno Titan and just won the turn I cast Inferno Titan. I think my opponent like 16 life or something. Excuse me. Just due to the fact of how many lands I had in the deck at the time, or how many lands I had in play at the time. Chandra, Torch of Defiance, also just a great value card. Removal, card advantage. The card is just epic level good. Bloodbraid Elf, a little bit of a weaker creature, a wimpier creature, but it does have haste, which is not irrelevant. As you saw in one of the matchups there, it was able to steal us the Monarchy for a very short time frame to draw cards. And it's also just value because you're going to get one of these decent threes and allow you to get more mana, maybe get a lock piece, maybe get a sword, or maybe just get a removal spell. And all of it's pretty good to get. It's not a counterspell deck, so I think it's always fine. Arlen Cord, she's not that great, but honestly, like the haste is not irrelevant in this deck. So I kind of like that portion of the card. And then her being able to be used as a removal spell is pretty good while you're kind of chumping out with like some of your crappy cards like, Wood Elves. Obstinate Baloth, just decent value against aggressive decks. Natural Order, it's a bomb. It can turn, a Wood Elves or, I don't know, a Deathrite Shaman into Primeval Titan or Dragon Lord Atarka and just win the game, like, pretty much on the spot. Flametongue Kavu, just a good value card. Like I said, I'm kind of more so adhering to a value-style deck with this deck because I kind of want to essentially out-card my opponents. I mean, like, you could say, like, yeah, you don't have a lot of card draw, but typically speaking, my cards are going to have effects that act like there are two cards, which is kind of how I define value in Magic. But I don't know if that's definitively true. The swords, they're just good in combat. I think this one, Sword of Feast of Famine, tends to be very good against 4-color blood, and Sword of Fire and Ice is just a bomb against red deck wins if you ever get to lock it up. Yavimaya Dryad, gums up the ground, allows you to get to big stuff, ramps you, randomly can hit through with Forest Walk into Planeswalkers, so pretty potent card. Eternal Witness allows you to buy stuff back and is, generally great. Den Protector here, like I said, kind of a similar effect, but is likely going to be replaced by Kitchen Finks in this deck, so I think it's just a more necessary effect. Eldritch Evolution, it's a miniature natural order. It allows you to turn your, defunct Conclave Naturalist, which is destroyed an artifact or enchantment, into, whatever you'd like it to. And the cool thing about this is it's actually not a green creature, so it can actually go after the Inferno Titan as well, even though it's not remotely as powerful as Natural Order. Courser of Crewfix, power value card, draws cards, essentially, off the top deck. It's just a bomb. The life gain's not irrelevant, but the main reason is it just draws cards for you. Wood Elves, decent value, gums up the ground, fuels, Gaia's Cradle, natural orders or Eldritch Evolutions into a 5. Just tends to be great. You don't see it in a ton of decks because it's more of a value-based card. It's not very aggressive. Really all it does is ramps you and gets you, a good chump blocker and buys you a little time, which kind of what the deck's looking for. It's looking to buy time until it can get to its 5s and 7s, or 5s, 6s, and 7s, because that's kind of what it kills with. And I guess it could kill with some of its 4s, some of its Planeswalkers. Tireless Tracker, another card engine, just a value card. Reclamation Sage, value, Nissa, Vastwood Seer, also value. It replaces itself immediately upon resolution and eventually turns into another draw engine, which is pretty good. Fierce Empath, really just a tutor to allow me to find just big dumb animals. Magus the Moon, put this main deck because at the end of the day it's still a Grey Ogre, which is not great, but not horrible either. And I kind of wanted to have a main deck Moon effect against 4-color Blood, because I think if you can hose their mana relatively early, you can tend to win games against them. Rafellos is just disgusting ramp. If the thing stays on the board and you have 2 forests in play and you go up to a 5th, or essentially a 3rd, but 6th mana, you're casting Primeval Titan on turn 3. It's a lightning rod, but it forces your opponent to use their turn to do that. And if they don't, then they're probably going to lose the game, because you just have double the mana that you'd have before. Wall of Roots blocks very well against the aggressive decks in the early to mid game, and allows you to get ahead on mana. 3 visits, great card as well. Just brings a land into play untapped, allows you to have some explosive turns, and generally speaking, explosive turns and explosive follow-up turns. Tarmogoyf, just the overall power level of this card. It's good versus aggro. It's good versus 4-color Blood. It tends to grow pretty rapidly. Sylvan Caryatid, good blocker versus aggro. Ramps you, is harder than heck to remove. Scavenging Ooze, this is kind of our one concession towards combo. Plus the card just randomly gains life, hoses graveyards, even if they're not like a Reanimator style deck. And it's just pretty good. Secure Tribelder, great as well. So I do have Mana Dorks in this deck, but typically speaking, I would prefer to have this style of deck not have to run them, or not run as many of them, because typically, because I'm not a Craterhoof deck, I would prefer to actually have the lands. Excuse me, guys. Sorry, I'm getting over a sickness. So Secure Tribelder is great in that regard, because it gives you the chump that you would generally get out of like a useless Mana Dork, but also, after giving you that chump block, transforms into, a brand new perfect shiny land 1 turn ahead of when you should have it. Rampant Growth, I don't know, the art's cool, it has a cool effect. It's not as good as Nature's Lore 3 visits, but I wanted more ramp in the deck, more land finding ramp. I suppose it could have been the Suspend one, but I think oftentimes you're not going to have that in your opening 7. You're going to draw it out of sequence. And I think Rampant Growth is just a little better. Harrow would be actually, I think, very good. But I'm always timorous about using effects like that, because if you get countered, or if they have an even mind sense or something, you're just getting blown out so badly. Fauna Shaman, great in this style of deck. It allows you to, fuel, I guess, Scavenging Ooze, Deathrite Shaman, but really just find bombs. So, I mean, like, you can turn, like, one of these stupid Mana Dorks, in the mid to late game into an Inferno Titan and just win. Alright, Incinerate, Arc Trail, Abrade. Incinerate, the most speculative. I just think the art's cool, and I wanted one more effect like this in the deck. Abrade, very good. Very happy with this card, and I like having it main more than Destructive Revelry, because the card just deals with a lot of different stuff. It's very flexible. I don't care about burning my opponent's face, generally speaking. Arc Trail, 2 for 1. Deathrite Shaman, another concession to Graveyard Hate, as well as sometimes Ramp. We run all the available fetches in these 2 colors. Whirly Tutor, card disadvantage, but finds you a bomb, which is generally very good. Mana Ramp, so just all these fellas and fellows up here are just Mana Dorks. And then we have kind of a smaller burn package plus Grim Lavamancer for more value. 40 land deck, so it runs a ton of mana. Because you don't want to miss land drops on this deck. Missing lands tends to be very bad. But the thing is, and you may say, like, oh, that's too many. I don't think it is on this deck. So part of, like, playing, like, Scape Shift, part of playing, like, the ramp-style decks, is that you assume some of that risk. But what I found in playtesting with this deck, and I've probably played it about 10 to 12 times, I've never felt like I was flooded out. And I don't know if I've lost a game yet with it. And if I have, I don't think it was to that. I think the opponent just had favorable interaction. But so far, it's kind of done pretty well, because I've played mostly against, the decks I was telling you I think are in the meta, which is White Weenie, Red Deck Wins, 4-color Blood. It really just on a lot of blue decks. We further kind of shore up some of those matchups with cards like, Sudden Demise against White Weenie, Anarchy, Disorder, which these are just straight-up hate cards. Branded Homeward Path for, like, random bribery decks, or treachery decks, or Vidalcan Shackles decks. Destructive Revelry, because it's a very good card, and that effect is sometimes needed in greater amounts. Blood Moon, just a bomb against the right decks. Miners, bombs against certain decks. Ancient Grudge, Stoneforge is a thing now. I think it's worth a nod. And then Pyro and Red Elemental Blast, plus Thrun, Choke, and Eyes the Wizened for the blue matchup. So, I hope you guys enjoyed this very short video series on Red-Green Moon Rampy, and I hope to see you out at the event sometime.